Welcome to another episode of the Reliability Matters podcast. I'm so glad you're with me today. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time viewing or listening to this podcast, I welcome you. I'm glad you're here. This is, as you can see from the background, I'm not in my normal studio. I am recording this from the beautiful Big Island of Hawaii. Why am I in Hawaii? Well, I'm at the SMTA, Pan-Pacific Strategic Electronics Symposium here on the Big Island. Every year this event takes place. It's SMTA's longest running event. This is year number 28. And I'm privileged and honored to be chairing this event. And we're going to be talking to the original founder. We're going to be talking to someone else who comes on a regular basis all the way from Europe to Hawaii. That's quite a trek. And we'll talk about the Pan-Pacific Conference historically and where it's going in the future. And then we'll talk to one of my longtime friends and colleagues in this business, Dr. Ron Lasky. But before we get started, here's the intro. Here's the voice of God. Listen to them and listen to him, and I'll be back in just a moment. Stick around.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Okay, welcome back. I'm glad you're back with me. As promised, I'd like to introduce my two guests today. To my left, as I'm sitting here, is Dr. Chuck Bauer. Chuck is the founder of this event, and we'll talk to him about what kind of nightmare he had or what kind of bet he lost to start a symposium on a tropical island far away from industry. And then my other guest is Keith Bryant, my long-term friend from the UK. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm glad you're both here. Chuck, let's start with you, since you're the founder of this effort. What in the world was in your mind when you thought it would be a great idea to start a highly technical symposium on an island that is far from highly technical?
Well, at the risk of going on too long, I will just a little bit of background. I started my own consulting practice in 1990, and when I did that, I had a motivation to travel, and I focused on international events. And after attending events in Japan, in Taiwan, and Singapore, and in England and Germany in the first 4 or 5 years that I was doing that, I discovered that the most important thing to my business and to my technical growth was networking. And I felt that we needed to find a way to encourage a much greater extent of networking around the world, because most of the networking tended to be much more regional and country-centered. And at the same time, I was also being a speaker and a presenter at SMTA events, IMAPS events, and SEMI events in the Bay Area. And so I said, well, what better place than to put it somewhere where it's convenient for the people in Asia as well as the people in North America? I had no idea that starting the very first year, 35% of the people would come from Europe. But that's what happened. And so my motivation was twofold. I felt that we had so many engineering societies and so many different organizations trying to present technical programs, and we had multiple countries and people from all over the world that needed to network, that we needed to have a place that was easy to get to. And I had already started the Advanced Technology Workshop program for IMAPS when I was their technology vice president in 1990 and 91. And that networking experience just, helped my career take off. And so I wanted to try and share that, and that was the purpose. And we had the first meeting of IMAPS, SEMI, and SMTA in the basement of my house in Evergreen, Colorado. And we had one meeting, lasted about 2.5 hours. We went out for dinner, and it started.
Wow. So in a nutshell, what were some of your most memorable experiences from PanPac and all the different events that we've had over the years on all the different islands and all the different sessions we had and all the different presentations within those sessions? What were some of the key takeaways?
I think that probably the biggest surprise, I already kind of alluded to, the biggest surprise was how quickly the event became global rather than bilateral. From the very beginning, we had about 35% coming from Europe. We had about 40 to 45% coming from the Americas, mostly North America, of course, Canada and the U.S., and another 25 or so, 30% coming from Asia. So that was probably the most surprising and really satisfying aspect of the initial era. The other thing that was really helped was that, in particular, from Japan and Europe, we got very high-level participation from the very beginning. Dr. Seiichi Denda and Mr. Iwao Tachikawa represented Japan and came to the event and brought 6 to 8 people from Japan right off the bat. Ishida-san was the vice chairman of Konica. About 4 years later, we had Tsuyoshi Kawanishi, the vice chairman of Toshiba Corporation, came, and he actually introduced the DVD player at this conference.
Wow.
When he was here. A few years later, we had Herb Reichel, who essentially, he wasn't the founder because it already existed, but essentially he took IZM Fraunhofer Institute from a dispersed research organization that just provided funding for research in Germany to the juggernaut that it is today in the research and development of electronics technologies. We also had people like Toru Ishida from Matsushita, who was their president of the research division of Matsushita Panasonic. And obviously, we all know Rao Tamala has been a figure here for many years, founder of the Georgia Tech Packaging Research Institute. And Mike Peck was here again this year. He's been here several times over the history and founded CalC. The last person I'll mention, although there have been many more, is Hajime Tomokage, a very dear friend who passed away of cancer a few years ago. But he founded the Fukuoka Research Institute in Japan, which is one of the leading research institutes in the electronics manufacturing arena. So we've really been able to draw a very high level of participants who really, they don't just come here to enjoy the sun and the palm trees. They come here to interact and get to know the people. And we all find out when we sit down with people like that, you always find out that they're just human beings like all the rest of us.
Sure. Excellent. Keith, besides sun and palm trees, what brings someone from Europe to all the way to Hawaii? I mean, it's a 2-day journey, right? You have to fly. Usually you spend the night in LA or you brave it and keep going, but it's 2 long journeys. What brings you specifically and so many of your European neighbors to this conference?
I can't speak for the European neighbors, but for me, basically, it's the best learning experience that I get in a year. And I travel like Jack does to conferences and seminars, workshops, events, pretty much around the world. And for me, this one it's completely different and it's better. I mean, I'm sitting here as dare I say it, a slightly well-qualified engineer. We've had 16 PhDs presenting, or will have by the end of time. And I was told there are 8 universities also. Let's say eight universities represented here. We've had a paper from the DoD. We've had another paper from someone who's funded by the Department of Defense. We've had a lot of really good fundamental research on what's going to be happening in the next year or two. We've had updates on low temperature solder. We've had a whole load of other stuff. We've had papers on reliability, AI, machine learning, how machine learning is going to be used positively in some of the stuff we're doing. And you don't hear it anywhere else. It's the honest answer.
Yeah. Where other conferences, which are great conferences, are somewhat single subject conferences. I'm thinking of Counterfeit Conference. I'm thinking of Cleaning and Coating. I'm thinking of Wafer Level. They are very focused on a particular subject matter. This conference, when I first started getting involved with this conference, Tanya Martin, our executive director, told me this was the conference of interesting things. And I think that that really sums it up. Even though they are very different topics, there are themes that just run through every single session. Like, we had a session on AI, but almost every session touched on AI to some degree, because it's the big gorilla in the room right now. We had a keynote on data using AI. Everything kind of creeps into everything else. And one thing I really think is great about this particular conference, this symposium, is normally when I speak at conferences, or when you speak at conferences, we're not speaking to the other presenters. We're speaking to the attendees, right? Because the other presenters are not our typical customer base. And we're not trying to impress them. We're trying to impress people who came to hear them and us. Here, I'm happy just talking. I mean, it's great that we have attendees here, but I am thrilled just to talk to the other presenters, because they are thought leaders in our industry. They're professors, they're PhDs. In most cases, they are industry C-level, C-suite executives. They're CEOs and COOs and CTOs, lots of C's going around. And they are people I would love to talk to because they're influential. They're the future of our industry. And just being able to present to each other is amazing. And it's our presenters that ask most of the challenging questions to our other presenters. So I think that's also what makes this unique. What would you like our industry to know about PanPac besides what we already said? Are there any preconceived notions? Like, there's always been two trains of thought with this event. One is minimize the fact that we're in Hawaii, because your boss won't let you go if they think there's palm trees and swimming pools. And if you have to expense sunscreen, that looks bad on your expense report. On the other hand, there's no conference like this on any mainland. So what are some of the preconceived notions that you hear about versus what your experience of the reality is with this event?
Well, I mean, I've wanted to come here since Chuck told me about it, and I can't remember how many years ago that was, but a lot. I made it the first time because we had some interesting research, and it was decided we wanted to publicize it in some of the, let's say, the more prestigious events, and this was deemed as one. And once I was here and saw exactly how different it is in terms of, as you said, the audience and everything else. The location, yeah, it's a benefit. But the reason it's a benefit is because we're all in the same place. We all go to Protonica, we all go to other places. You go to the show or the event for the day, and then everybody disappears in the evening, and then you might see somebody the next day or not. Here, for 4 or 5 days, we're all based in the same place. And it really gives you that chance to interact with people. You see a presentation, and quite often at the end of it, you've got half a question in your head, but you can't really format it. But you see the guy at breakfast the next day, so you can have the conversation.
Right.
Yeah. And that, for me, that's what makes it unique. But the big problem for people is coming here the first time. Because once you've been and you understand the value, then, it's, I won't say a no-brainer, because, it is always a challenge by where the location is. But, it's a completely unique event. And, we all traveled to a lot of events, a lot of places, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me. It is, the best event in terms of networking in terms of seeing what I would describe as fundamental research. It's not a company who's just about to launch a new product who's going to tell you that it's better than the last product they had, which, to be honest, in a lot of cases is what we tend to see in a lot of conferences. Okay, they may present some data as to why, but that's really it. We don't have people saying, I work for the Department of Defense and I've done this amount of research on materials. We've talked about electronic deposition of materials. We've talked about additive manufacturing to make circuit boards and assemblies. We've talked printed electronics, but we've talked printed electronics using water-based materials rather than all the nasty solvents, which is something, until I came here and heard it, I never even realized was possible.
Right.
And, that's probably the best explanation of, why people would come back and back. I work as a consultant, and people, everyone's asking you a lot of questions from a lot of different places over the year. And a lot of the answers I get from being here.
Yeah.
And, it's just, sounds simple to say, but it's a better conference, but a different conference than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of networking, my next guest will be up here in just a few moments, and I met my next guest here. I knew him. We rubbed shoulders at conferences for years because we've both been in this business as a child labor. When we were both infants, we were brought into this business. And it wasn't until I formally met him, literally at a breakfast table at this event several years ago, that we connected and became friends and became colleagues and have interacted with each other in various ways. Me at his university, he on my show, and providing me guests. He's my best booking agent because he provides me most of his, I think, in order to graduate his class, they have to appear on my podcast. So he's great for booking. But at any rate, thank you, Chuck, for starting this event.
Answer that question?
Well, no, I wish we could. I will have an entire episode dedicated to this subject and Chuck Bauer, but we do have to move on. Thank you, Keith. Thanks for starting the show.
All right.
You are a great reason to come to Hawaii. Dr. Professor Ron Lasky, welcome to the program. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
I think this is maybe your third appearance or so.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, I've had you on talking about your books.
Yep.
I've had you on with your students.
Yep.
And now here we are where we met.
Sure, that's right.
At kind of
6 years ago right here.
6 years ago right here on this very island. Yep. So I'm glad you're back. Let's talk about education for a little bit. And let's talk about what old guys like to talk about, young people. I'm convinced that if you start any sentence with young people these days, you have officially become your father, right? So Ron and I have had conversations like this before, but let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about universities. Universities are well known for turning out engineers, right? Yep. That's one of the things they do, and they do that quite well. And you teach an innovation course at Dartmouth that's designed for engineers and scientists, people within the science world. What are some of the key advantages, or what key advantages do engineers receive from also being immersed in innovation and entrepreneurship, in addition to how electrons work and sure, chemical and physics and all that? There's that is a science, and that is very predictable, and 1 + 1 is always 2. Physics never fails. Math never lies. Innovation is a bit of a gray subject.
Yes.
How do you combine all that, and what lands on your students?
Well, quite a few years ago now, one of the professors that you met, Eric Fossum, and our dean at the time, Joe Elbley, thought about the fact that there was no course in innovation. And many of our PhD students...
Well, if you don't mind me interrupting, yeah. Eric Fossum, for those that don't know, was a speaker here. He invented the modern digital camera. He basically invented the CMOS image sensor. So he's quite a celebrity that no one's ever heard of unless you're in the engineering world. So yeah. Sorry, Ron.
Yeah, 10 billion of his CMOS image sensors are sold each year. Anyway, being an entrepreneur himself, I think he started 5 companies. It occurred to him and some of the other professors that many of our students have really interesting ideas and technology that they work on, and they don't know how to develop it into a company and a sellable product. So Eric developed the course first, and he and I discussed it, and he asked me to take over teaching it. This is the third time I've taught it, and you've been one of the kickoff speakers every year.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. I feel like I'm stealing candy from babies. I get more out of it than I think any of the students get, probably combined. So when we talk about new generation, millennials, Gen Zers, whatever label we want to put on it, what are some of the major differences with today's students compared to students that are entering your classes now? You've been doing this for a while,
yes.
and you were a student
Yes.
once,
Yes.
150 years ago or so, right? Like
180.
me, 180. What do you see the basic, high-level differences in it?
Well, I think today's students, a lot of them are much more creative than certainly I was in my era of time. And I know some people, and I guess it's true for every generation, people, think that the young people today are not what they were in the past, sort of in a negative sense. And I think you've met a lot of them, Mike. Mm-hmm. I can just give you comfort that there are a lot of amazing young people, and the future of the world is safe. I think we can conclude from what we see that they're definitely more into, obviously, the technology and recognizing uses for it. So it helps them to be, I think, more creative and to probably bring things to fruition faster.
Yeah, one of the changes I've seen is in a bizarre metric. One of the things I do with you is at the end of your innovations course, students have to kind of do a kind of an elevator pitch competition and present their business plan. Some of them are real businesses that they've started. Some of them are mock businesses, but they have to present a plan as if it's real. Ron sets up a kind of a board of judges, so to speak, kind of like American Idol. I always think I'm the Simon Cowell guy. I'm the guy that's quite critical. And they have to show pro forma, financial statements and things like that. And almost every pitch when it comes to long-term strategy is at this stage of business, we're going to go for this seed round, and then we're going to go for the second round, and then we're going to go B rounding, C rounds, E rounds, and then we're going to do an IPO, and then we're all going to, buy a yacht and an island and join Elon Musk at cocktail parties. Almost all of them have that kind of exit strategy. When I started my business, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are around my age, exit strategy is the last. We have to be taught exit strategy. We don't have an exit strategy. Our plan is to, die at our desk, at some point. And young people are seeing way past that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
There seems to be a wider view. Sure. and a goal beyond just creating a product.
Right.
Is that something that you've noticed as well?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. One of the things you pointed out is it's also, I guess, I was going to say on the negative side, I don't mean to be negative, but the students are very optimistic. And one of the things that I think we try to bring forth in the course, and you do when you speak, is that there are a lot more challenges than you think. And to bring something to fruition that's a product that results in a company is a pretty big challenge. And I think you mentioned just when we were at dinner a little while ago, 75% of businesses fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is good that you mentioned that, because it keeps all of us humble, but especially someone starting out in a new business.
What does our generation, baby boomers, what do we get wrong in our assessment of the new generation? What stereotypes are stuck with us that really, when we dig into it, aren't accurate?
I think probably that they won't work as hard as we did. I think they absolutely will work as hard as we did. As I said, they're clearly very smart. And I think also for the age, and you've met some of my students, for their age, they're very mature. And they understand the world at least better than I did when I was 22 or 23.
No, I think they do. I think people grow up a little faster. I think just the modern media, we're surrounded. We're not protected.
Sure.
Necessarily, and we're certainly more aware. What advice would you give to emerging engineers and technicians that want to enter our industry? What would you tell them while they're still in school?
Well, especially if they're interested in innovation and starting a company is that right off the bat, you have to think, how is it going to make money? And how is it going to end up being a product? Because I see sometimes before taking the course that we teach, that a lot of young people will be over-optimistic about the likelihood of something that they're working on being successful. And they have all the technical ideas right, but taking the technical ideas into something that is a product that people will want to buy and all of that, there's a lot more to it than just a really good technical idea.
Yeah.
Could I share a little bit, though? Do we have time about some students that have took our course and are now being quite successful? Can I briefly mention their company?
Of course.
Yeah. So there are two gals that took our innovation program not too many years ago, maybe 4 or 5, Amoga Tadamati and Allison Birkland. And they started a company called Nanopath. And it is simply, in my very high-level understanding of it, they're able to take, like, say, if someone has a urinary tract infection, they can go to the doctor, and they have a test that in less than 15 minutes, they can tell what the bacteria is. And then they purposely worked at 15 minutes because a doctor's visit is usually 20 minutes. So you can get the diagnosis right then and get the medication you need instead of having to have something where you take days, maybe even a little longer if it has to be cultured to get your treatment. And they've done the business case from a financial perspective and everything, and they're just at the point of really taking off. They got a lot of good funding and everything. That's Nanopath. You can see the story if you go online at nanopath.com.
Interesting. I'd like to say maybe a few years from now we can say we talked about that company here first.
Right. There you go.
Another reason to come to PanPac. So Dartmouth is unique, as I understand the university system. Dartmouth is unique because it is a liberal arts school, or the engineering is within a liberal arts format. So it's a BA.
BA first, yeah.
A BA first, and then it can morph into a BS, right?
Yep.
But it is other engineering schools are not. They don't have that liberal arts component to the engineering side. What advantage does that give an engineering student, someone who graduates from an Ivy League school that was immersed in a liberal arts / engineering program? Right. Sometimes those are just, you don't say liberal arts and engineering in the same sentence. How does that benefit?
Yeah, that's something that I've come to appreciate. I graduated from Cornell with my bachelor's degree, not Dartmouth. And if you think about somebody, Mike, like either of us, what we do the most is speak and write. Now, it's admittedly about technical things. If we didn't have the technical things to speak and write about, we wouldn't be able to speak and write about it. But I spend most of my time speaking and writing, and when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I really was uncomfortable writing and absolutely speaking. And I think you've now already seen one of our students, undergraduate student Haley Mullins, at 21 years old, be able to stand up in front of a group and give a presentation, very poised. Her writing, the paper she wrote and co-authored with me, I didn't even really have to edit it. It was really well done. So we think at Dartmouth that having a liberal experience with your engineering experience is really very, very helpful to your career, because if you're going to be successful, especially if you want to go to the upper level in your field, speaking and writing is really, really important.
Excellent. And speaking of your student being here, 2 of your students being here and both of them presenting this particular conference, you're known not just as a university professor, not just showing up and giving a presentation. You drag your students along with you. They drag, like no one has to be dragged here, right? But
every year we've had
you encourage your students to come to Hawaii. What advantage does that exposure, that, they're certainly not talking, they're talking to their future peers, but they're not in the same peer group. The people in our audience are also speakers, and they're highly educated and highly experienced. They've been around the block a few times in order to present here. And these young people haven't even graduated yet, and they're really probably not in the workforce, other than, do you want fries with that? Right. College jobs. So what advantage do you think that gives your students to be able to be on an equal footing, at least for 30 minutes, with their future peers?
It certainly looks great on their resume, and I think also for their confidence. And that's why I like to really bring students here to give them the experience of getting up in front of a group and speaking. And of course, all of you are very kind and supportive, so that helps quite a bit. But I just think, think back at your own career, how helpful it would have been to you when you were 21 years old to be in a venue like this, where it's a little less stressful than, excuse me, maybe speaking in front of 200 people, to come here and sort of get a start in a small, welcoming environment like this.
Your effort to kind of teach entrepreneurship and innovation. One of the things I always tell people in your class and other times I speak on the subject of entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship. You can be entrepreneurial. You can be an entrepreneur, and that doesn't mean you have to own your own company. That's typically the route entrepreneurs take. But you can be very entrepreneurial in your cubicle. You can be very entrepreneurial in a design review meeting. You can be entrepreneurial in reliability assessment meeting, whatever. I think entrepreneurs think without the same boundaries that many of us have been kind of trained to think. Oh, we tried that before, it doesn't work. I think questioning, like, why not? Why did it not work? I think entrepreneurs lack a certain sense of reality, and those of you who have worked for company founders that are entrepreneurs probably totally get that. We can be very frustrating people because we don't really accept the same hypotheses that have been presented before, and we typically will just keep trying at something until we find a way in, and maybe others have given up a little too soon. So I think that the innovations course that you teach, your university pushes, is valuable even beyond, probably even more beyond people who actually start their own business. Because to think like an entrepreneur, I think will accelerate someone's career. I would rather have all my employees think as if this were their company. Maybe not give them all a credit card and a checkbook with that thought, but at least have the mindset of this could be their company. Finally, last question, what if you could put an estimated number, what percentage of your students do you believe go on to start their own companies?
I'm going to say it's not super high, probably in the 20% range. Because, it is a bigger deal than you think. And of course, what the choice you have is, should I start my own company with all of that risk, or go get a job for $180,000 a year with a PhD, working for somebody else? So that's a good statistic, though. I'm sure we have that, but I'm going to guess it's like 1 in 5, something like that. But
that's still good.
But still, that's good. Yeah. I think the company I mentioned is just looks like it's going to be a real home run. And you mentioned something, I think, that when you were younger, you have brash, sometimes crazy ideas, but that's really needed because it's the people with the crazy ideas that make things happen, even though maybe not every time, but some of the time. And older folks like me would just say, no, that's probably not going to work. So it's good that there are young, brash people.
Yeah, I think starting a business is definitely for the young, or at least the young at mind, young at heart, because if you have too much common sense, you would never in your right mind start a business, because the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics states that 75% of all businesses fail, ultimately. 75%. That's just a stat. Some industries are higher, some are lower. But if a doctor told you had a 25% chance of living, you'd start making end-of-life plans, buy a timeshare in Hawaii knowing you'll never have to pay for it. So I do think that one of the advantages I had when I started my business, and a lot of young people have, is they're too ignorant to know it's how dangerous it is. And the skills that I brought to the table, skills, air quotes, were ego, arrogance, naivety, a very poor assessment of risk, and a lot of passion. That's all I brought. And knowledge in my field, but that's really all I brought to the table. But those skills, ego, arrogance, naivety, poor assessment of risk, they're the starter fluid down the carburetor. Right? Young people won't know what I'm talking about. Starter fluid down the carburetor, super high octane. It'll turn over once and start your car. But you can't run on that. So that's like first gear. First gear, highly leveraged, high torque, super fast RPM. You can't go more than 20 miles an hour in first gear. But you need that first gear. You can't start in fifth. So I think there's a time to take that energy, ignore the risk, throw caution to the wind, throw yourself into it, learn all the things that you learned in your engineering school, if that's the track that you need to make your business successful, or the trade, everything that you were taught from a science standpoint, and then from a business standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, and just throw your whole heart into it. And I think that the reason 75% of businesses fail is not because that's just the reality, the way it has to be. I think 75% of businesses fail because the founders don't know when to either acquire or learn the new skills that are required to go to the next level. Because the skills that are required to take you from A to B will kill you from B to C. Guaranteed. And you need to shift from first to second to third, fourth, fifth, overdrive, however many gears you have. And if you can't learn it, acquire it, hire it. And your students are probably a good sample pool to hire from because they've at least had that exposure. So I appreciate any engineering school that also teaches them or gives them a preview of what business is like in innovation and entrepreneurship, because that's something that they will learn the hard way. And if they don't have any extra advantage, like a course like your school's, yours, then they're going to be part of that 25-75. That's just a cruel statistic. But if they do get that immersion a little earlier in their career, before they start their career, I think we can move the odds to 50-50 or maybe 75-25, the opposite direction. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Ron, for being here. And it's good to see you again.
I'd like to thank you, too, for all the help you've given my students over the years.
It makes me young, so I enjoy it. And I get inspired. So when people complain to me about those Gen Zers or those millennials, I go, no. Maybe the ones you're talking to, the ones I see are amazing. I feel really good that when I'm old and decrepit and need support, I'm going to be well taken care of.
The world's in good hands with you.
The world is in good hands. We're not going anywhere. Well, thank you to my live audience. It's not off. Usually I'm looking at a teleprompter. It's really nice to see eyeballs, across from me. So thanks for being here. And to those listening to the podcast or watching the podcast on our YouTube channel, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And a special thanks also to Circuit Assembly Magazine's PCB chat and to Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm, both for syndicating the show. I really appreciate their work in expanding our audience reach. Also, if you have any questions or episode suggestions, don't hesitate for a second to reach out. I love to hear from you. You always send me some really good comments. You can reach me at my email address, which is right down here on the screen somewhere. And it's Mike, for those listening, mike@mikeconrad.com. Just remember that's Conrad with a K. All right. Thanks again for listening or for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, be sure and click the like, subscribe, and bell icons to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month. Until I see you all again, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and perhaps most importantly, keep doing it right. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.